Welcome back to the Talking Pools podcast, your go-to source for everything wet, wild, and wonderfully misunderstood in the pool world. I'm Natalie Hood, Director of Education Network Development for The Grit Game, and today we're diving into one of the most talked about and I think one of the most misunderstood construction methods in the industry, ICF pools. Now, before all of my listeners are like, what? What are ICF pools? We're going to get into that. ICF pools, they spark a lot of curiosity and even more confusion. Some builders think, well, they're only for specialty projects, or others assume they're too complex, and plenty still believe they're just a trend. But in reality, ICF pools deliver strength, efficiency, speed, and design flexibility in ways traditional methods simply can't match. And they're rapidly becoming a go-to solution for modern pool construction. And today I have the pleasure of sitting down with someone who brings both expertise and a little bit of magic to the job site, Manny Sanchez, also known as Magic Manny. He is the National Building Materials Manager with the Grit Game. Manny has been in the trenches with ICF pool builds across the region, training teams, troubleshooting challenges, and showing builders how to unlock full potential of this system. Manny, before we jump into myths and get into all of your magic, if you will, can you give our listeners kind of like your background, how you came about with the Grit Gang?
Well, hi. Thanks for having me today. My name is Manny Sanchez. I'm currently the National Building Materials Manager for the Grit Game. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, going on 30. My time in the pool industry started with Pool Corp. I worked there, did everything I need there. And in that time, I've worked directly with builders, distributors, manufacturers, helping to bring better products and better systems to the field.
So before we dive into ICF pools, can you kind of give our listeners an idea of what ICF pools mean, what they are?
Well, the first question is probably, what in the world is an ICF?
Yes.
So what ICF means is insulated concrete form. Sounds like a construction product. Well, yes, it is. It's predominantly used in building of homes, buildings. It's everything aside from pool, but now it's kind of caught on, and we're excited to be working with it.
Well, I appreciate you giving myself and our listeners kind of a background of what ICF pools are. And, here on Wednesdays, we like to bust the myths. And so we have quite a few myths we're going to go through today. So I'm just going to kind of dive deep into it, if that's fine with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first myth I want to discuss is ICF pools are more expensive than traditional concrete pools.
Well, the biggest cost factor with ICF pool is labor. You don't necessarily require experienced gunite or shotcrete crews to build your walls because the blocks assemble like a set of Legos. Generally, even the least experienced individuals can stack a wall. The knowledge for the job site is needed for bracing and make sure you have a plumbed and level wall before pour. That's the biggest thing, right? The next thing is, where are you at regionally?
Right. That's a big question.
Right. Big question. So
Big
let's
question.
consider, like, if you're in a Sun Belt, an ICF pool is going to be very similar in cost to concrete. Whereas if you're somewhere in the Midwest or somewhere colder, right, snow belt, as I like to say, the cost to an ICF pool is going to range somewhere in the market of like what a vinyl liner pool would cost you, which it'd be significantly less than a shotcrete build in those climates.
And, you talk about costs, retail cost factors, labor, speed, material efficiency, long-term savings. And you're saying some of the biggest cost savings is labor. Okay. And so what about when ICF may cost the same, or is it less than concrete pools?
So generally, material-wise, and here's the misconception. Typically, when you go in and you build a normal gunite or shotcrete pool, you have a crew coming in, an experienced crew who you're paying for the knowledge to be able to work a shotcrete rig or work a gunite crew. ICF blocks are sold individually, and there's a significant cost with an ICF block, right? Because we're typically using it for insulation, we're using it for structural endurance, things of that nature. So when you look at an ICF block, you don't necessarily see I don't have to invest in that in a regular pool. I just shoot my concrete against the wall, right? The excavation, and I have a pool. Why do I need to buy this block?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the cost, I guess, for material, where that gets offset is somebody like you or myself could go out there, stack the walls, call a contractor to come in with the pump the walls, and we have a wall. There's no necessarily special expertise that's needed to do so.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like ICF pools, they're not more expensive than traditional concrete pools.
Absolutely not.
You know what time it is? Wednesday vibes on the Talking Pools podcast. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sun up, tools out, route rolling fine, but I'm tuning in, yeah, Natalie's on the line. Guess at the ready, stories that shine, from filters to heaters, they tell it in time. Hey, Wednesday, Natalie lead the way, Talking Pools podcast make the week feel irate. Hey, Wednesday, knowledge start to play, Natalie and the crew keep the blue water happy. Chem talk, pump talk, tricks of the trade, field hacks, flashbacks, our legends are made. Laughs in the mix with the facts she lays, every single segment got that reggae sway. Hey, Wednesday, Natalie lead the way, Talking Pools podcast make the week feel irate. Hey, Wednesday, knowledge start to play, Natalie and the crew keep the blue water happy. Who run the midweek, Natalie? Who bring the deep speak, Natalie? Clear up the green streak, Natalie. Talking Pools, turn it up, reality. So roll that rope and ride the tune. Wednesday waves be coming soon. Natalie, take the mic, boom. Talking Pools, we're in the groove zoom. Hey, Wednesday, Natalie lead the way. Talking Pools, podcast make the week feel irate. Hey, Wednesday, knowledge start to play, Natalie and the crew keep the blue water happy. Hey, Wednesday, Natalie lead the way, Talking Pools, podcast make the week feel irate. Hey, Wednesday, knowledge start to play, Natalie and the crew keep the blue water happy.
Hey Pool Pros! Tired of roasting under the sun and gear that doesn't hold up? Revved Up Apparel has your back with SPF protected apparel made for the Pool Pro. Want to stand out from the competition? Done! No minimum orders, no inventory stress. We handle the design, posting, printing, and fulfillment, so you can focus on the grind. Whether you're a single pooler or managing a whole fleet, this is how you gear up smart and stay sharp. Check out revvedupapparel.com. Built for the Pool Pro.
You know, another thing that I've heard is that ICF is really only suitable for basements or underground structures.
Well, ICF is the gold standard for basements. ICF acts as a continuous vapor barrier, provides superior insulation. It's also mold and pest resistant, making it the perfect product for a basement. So yes, you need all those things when building a basement, right? You know, you need to keep out the pests. You need to keep out the moisture where you have a high water table. An ICF wall does that for you.
Well, and I feel like too, when you do a lot of anytime I've done construction in my house, or I've seen neighbors do construction, anytime there's any type of movement of the land, all of those little pests, they go scurrying and they kind of come into your house and they're just everywhere.
Yes, go ahead. I apologize.
Go ahead.
The thing about an ICF wall in the basement is it is a continuously poured concrete wall. So a pest would have to go through your primary waterproofing, then have to, all through an ICF block, they get through a solid concrete wall before it gets into your home. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the same thing with moisture. This is the same thing with roots or anything that would find a way through a crack in the wall. You just don't get that in an ICF basement. And that's kind of where we take more or less the same sort of construction method and thought process into a swimming pool. If it can't get in, it can't get out.
Right, right. Well, I think, like you said, as historical use, ICF was really done in vertical construction, right? In like the olden days.
Well, in the dark ages.
Yes, the dark ages, if you will.
So this is kind of how it came to be, right? In the old days, you used ICF for superior thermal insulation, meaning it kept stuff warm, right? It kept the cold out.
Mm-hmm.
Predominantly, it was found and developed in cold climates, developed in Europe, where the northern part of Europe, there was a gentleman there is like, hey, what if we use the foam to create a form for the concrete walls? Hence where ICF was created.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I grew up in California and lived in Colorado for 11 years, and I didn't see a whole lot of pools outside in Colorado, but we always had the gyms, and so I guess ICF would probably be suitable for Colorado. It kind of sounds like.
Absolutely. I get a lot of calls from Colorado because a lot of the hype behind an ICF pool or ICF homes, for example, is they're going to save significantly on heating and cooling their home. ICFs are also engineered in a way where they're disaster resistant. It'll withstand tornadoes, hurricanes. It'll withstand seismic activity. There's a lot of that things. Some ICF is even fire resistant. So in areas such as Colorado, California, with forest fires, things of that sort, ICF is becoming a popular product just because of that. Whereas, if you're building a home out of lumber, obviously you're susceptible to all those natural occurrences.
Got it. That makes sense. I have to admit, I have been watching a show. Oh God, I think it's like on MGM and it's called From. And it's about these people that got stuck in I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's about these people that got stuck in this just like random location and they're trying to find their way out. It's kind of like Walking Dead, but advanced Walking Dead. It's kind of funny, but a lot of it is I'll see them out in like, wooden homes or what have you, or, cabins, if you will, and they're freezing at night. And I'm like, So thought it was kind of interesting. I don't know why I thought of that, just probably because I'm like binge watching that darn show.
If they built it, they wouldn't be cold.
Yeah, there you go. And so I guess what are some examples of above ground and hybrid ICF pool applications?
So examples of above ground and hybrid pool applications. It doesn't matter whether we install the pool in ground or above ground. Manufacturer spec for ICF foam is the same regardless. Because when we're building these walls, they're solid concrete or rebar reinforced. It typically exceeds what you would normally require for a swimming pool. So these walls, when we build them, whether it's in ground, above ground, some of the engineering might change, which you should refer to engineering recommendations at any time, right? But in most situations, our walls are exactly the same. So a really good example is if we're building a pool on a hillside, for example, and we need to excavate a ton of soil, right? Because we got a hillside kind of sloping like this.
Mhm.
Well, normally, if we were doing a shotcrete vessel, we would form up the side, dig an enormous footer, shoot the concrete against the wall, right? Form it, and then we have a wall. Where with an ICF vessel, we simply build a retaining wall. We simply build a
Yeah.
retaining wall, right? And with that retaining wall is then we go in, hopefully we do a monolithic pour. It's all combined and it's together, waterproof it, and you essentially have a swimming pool. Yeah. So the biggest advantage with ICF, and this is what I tell a lot of my builders that I work with, is if you have something that's above grade, it works great because you got to form a wall anyways. You might as well control whatever you can do with the wall. And with an ICF wall, you're stacking it up, you're bracing it, you're making sure it's straight. If you're cutting a negative edge, it's simply easy to just go in and cut the negative edge on the wall. You pour your concrete and you just more or less form the bond beam. It's an ingenious concept.
It is. That's really cool. Well, and that kind of goes to our next myth where we talk about where ICF pools are weaker than shotcrete or traditional concrete pools. I think you're going to have fun with that one.
This answer is certainly going to create debate. If you ask me, I would say an ICF vessel is superior to a traditional concrete application. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with how we build pools now. ICF pools are typically engineered very similar to concrete vessels. In most cases, the rebar is exactly the same. The only difference is you have foam forming it. So think of your traditional shotcrete engineering with number 4, number 3, number 5 rebar, right? Double lapped or however it is. An ICF pool will more or less have the same engineering, right? The biggest advantage of it is, hey, we have forms, right? The biggest difference, if you utilize ICF in that capacity, you're going to get thermal efficiency, structural resilience, and a moisture barrier all in one. And you don't get that with traditional concrete building.
Okay. So with that, what are some of the strength comparisons?
Well, so shotcrete, because that's what most people do, shotcrete typically cures to a higher PSI because they are pneumatically applied. Shotcrete gently relies on nozzleman skill. Things like poor technique can lead to shadowing, cold joints, or rebound. All these things can lead to cracks and leaks. Whereas an ICF utilizes a cast-in-place method. The concrete is poured into a solid form. The process virtually eliminates voids and air pockets. Now, of course, there's recommended consolidation processes when you're pouring anything that is solid concrete. But if done correctly, it's a great process. And it should be stronger.
Okay. So what about with engineering standards and load performance?
So again, shotcrete is going to win in raw PSI, right? Over the course of overtime, shotcrete's going to continuously increase in PSI strength, right? Whereas ICF will win in lateral flexibility, uniformity, and environmental load. These are all things that traditional concrete doesn't really apply to.
So then why when, foam, let's say foam, for example, why does that lead people to underestimate the system, if you will?
Well, let's look at this. Foam is perceived as an inferior product because it can be brittle. The thing to remember is not all foam is the same. There's low density foam, like what you would find in an ice chest that you buy at Circle K, right?
Yes.
People look at that, it breaks, or the foam that you get in like in a new
Centigrade.
appliance you buy, trumbles. Then, that's what people perceive as foam because that's just cheap packing material, right? It's made to, like when you buy something new and has foam in it, it's to prevent damage, right? Because there's a cushioning effect, right? The foams, they get damaged before my appliance or my good does, right? Where when you use a high density foam, right, which is we keep calling it foam. The proper name is polystyrene.
There you go.
Right. So but we'll call it foam just to make it easy. Right.
Yep.
There's high density polystyrene foam. We use this for fill on highways. Right. Yeah. So like.
No idea. Really?
Yeah. So like if you.
Things you learn.
So if you're in an area where like there's not a lot of material, right? Probably like on the Gulf Coast or something like that. You'll see somebody is building an overpass. You'll see these huge blocks of foam. They'll stack them together and then they'll build a road over it. Another example of what they use high density foam and when I guess one thing that really got my mind thinking about this years ago is I was meeting with the builder in New Mexico and we were talking about insulating these pools and finding another way to do so. And he goes, and we talked about the tarmac at the airport and these colder climates.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I learned that day was typically they will apply foam underneath the concrete, under the tarmac, right, to keep it from frosting.
That actually makes a whole lot of sense.
So think of it like this: if it can hold a plane, right?
Yeah.
or if it can hold, the amount of trucks that go over an overpass or drive over a highway on currents of a day. Imagine what it can do in other applications, such as your home or even your swimming pool.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm flying out early next week to go out to the Atlantic City show, so this episode will air well after that. But one of the big concerns is everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna get a ton of snow in Tennessee," and I lived in obviously grew up in California, but I lived in Colorado Springs for 11 years, and everyone's like, "Oh, there's snow coming, and the supermarkets are so busy," and I'm just like, you guys, the weather's like 40 to 50. It's probably not going to snow. Yes, it's going to get icy towards the night, but it's probably not going to snow because it's not cold enough. But I never thought about it from that perspective I just thought it was concrete out there that the planes were sitting on. So, learn something new every day.
Pretty cool, huh? I thought that I was from that point on, I was kind of fascinated by it. And back when I worked with Pool Corp, I was like, imagine if we can take this foam and put it in swimming pools, extend these swim seasons, give people another reason to buy a swimming pool, extend their pool season without having to expend all this additional capital and just to keep a vessel warm. I mean, we got our Yetis, right? Right. They keep water warm, right? We got ice chests. What we're doing with ICF is we're basically building a giant Yeti, right? And right. And it's keeping the heat from, and I know this is probably part of the conversation down our podcast here, but we'll get into it a little bit. The biggest benefit of ICF is insulation, right?
Mhm.
Insulation more than anything. And
Yeah,
it
it sounds
just,
like it.
absolutely.
So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. And when I think of ICF construction, it doesn't offer meaningful benefits over standard pool builds.
Well,
Does it have energy efficiency? What's the temperature retention? What does all that look like?
well, that's a loaded question because we
Yeah,
can go to 4 or 5 different podcasts, kind of chatting about that. But let's talk about
short
energy
version.
efficiency because that's what most people can relate to, right? It's like if I'm spending less energy, I'm spending less money, right? With some of the examples that we've done in colder climates, we've tested pools in Colorado, which is I think it gets pretty cold there.
A
We
little
we
chilly.
we've had side by side pools because that's always a comparison, right? And one of my favorites is I had a client in Grand Junction. His neighbor had a vinyl liner pool next door, right,
Mhm.
with a cover, right, and we built our foam pool on his property with the cover. And we did some other things. We insulated the trenches, right? Okay, both pools had a heat pump and a heater because we like utilizing heat pumps, and with ICF because it helps regulate the heat and it's a cheap way to do it, less expensive way to do it. Well, the first thing we notice is his neighbor's pool froze over 6 inches
Ooh.
during this harsh winter. Okay, this pool here, our foam pool, we never winterized it. Okay, we ran it year round. Okay, now he did keep the heat pump and the heater at a very low level just in case, but it never got there. Right?
Wow,
It never
that's
got
really
there.
cool.
I was fascinated by it. And, I asked them, get me, I go like, well, hey, what's your neighbor's electricity? What's your normal electricity bill and gas bill versus, heating this pool the next year? Right? He heated his 20 by 40 pool that has a gas heater and a heat pump. His bill, the difference on his bill from one year to the next was only $1,000. So it's estimated that we can save anywhere between 60 to 80% on the energy costs of heating your vessel by utilizing ICF. Okay.
That's really
And
cool.
well, yeah, there's variables. Do I put a cover on it? How long it is off? Right. But if you're religious about doing those things, that's the kind of money you could save if you're an individual who's looking to heat their pool year round. Right.
Yeah.
The next thing you asked me was about strength, right?
Yes.
Okay. So back to the engineering, there's something I like to look at with ICF foam vessels. It's the tensile strength, right? So like when you're pouring in an ICF pool, you got a wall, right? And you have all these plastic ties in there that center your rebar, right?
Okay.
So our rebar is always in the spot it is supposed to be, right? So depending on your shoot, and if you've ever been at a job site where they're shooting a plastic pool, so there's the rebar cage. Once you get concrete on it, you don't know if it's 2 inches thick. You don't know if it's 6 inches thick.
Right.
I've personally been out on remodels, and we're in some of my experiences and trying to learn stuff about the industry, we're chipping out a pool, right, and we blow through the whole of the floor because there's only 2 inches of concrete, right?
Yeah.
Or on the wall where, you start to get rebar staining because, we didn't know until 3 or 4 years down the road that the rebar was only sitting an inch behind the shotcrete, behind the plaster, right? Well, we have the moisture that goes in, right? It starts to rot out the rebar starts to bleed. You see it. That is
Mhm.
something you never get with an ICF vessel. A, because again, the rebar is centered. B is we know how much concrete is on each side of that bar, whether vertically or horizontally. On top of that, we have an ICF wall that for the most part, in most circumstances, if it'll sit outside, it's water resistant. But in a swimming pool, we're just going to call it's a vapor guard, right? It's going to prevent nature in. But then on top of that, we put a waterproof barrier. So it doesn't come in. But strength-wise, that's why I believe, even though rebar and concrete spec and engineering might be the same as your traditional concrete tool, we do all these other things are essentially included when you build an ICF pool. So back to your perceived cost, right? If it costs me exactly the same to do it, why wouldn't I do it if I get all these other things, right?
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of reduced material waste too.
There can be, right? Like it's as with everything. These blocks, most blocks are 4 foot long, 16 inches tall. Some of them are 12 inches tall. So if you have a 20-foot pool, you're going to use 5 blocks. But if it's 19, you're going to have a foot worth of waste, right?
Yeah.
Right. And what you're essentially disposing of is you're always going to have some sort of waste on anything. Like if you're building a home, you're cutting a 2x4, you're going to have a foot of lumber you can't use. Right. Well, same thing with ICF. If you measure your pool to exactly the length that where a corner or a straight will take you, you're not going to have any waste. But that's generally not the case. You have a little bit of waste. You might have 3 or 4 blocks. I mean, we're talking about the kind of material you would find in a washer machine, right? You can fit that in a trash can. In some instances, the guys are just kind of putting it back in the trench. And we've already talked about, how dense it is. You can, in a lot of cases, just bury it, right? Waste-wise, a question about waste. One example that kind of caught my attention on this as well, there's a lot of variables when you're doing a gunite or shotcrete pool, right? You can go out there and you can say, I got a 20x40 pool, I got a 8-inch wall, right? You figure out your area, your linear footage, whatever the builder needs to do to find out exactly the amount of material they need. Well, you don't know when you're out there that there was an overdig, there was some erosion, all these things. It's like, well, now I had to order an extra truck of concrete, right? But all I really needed was 4 yards of concrete. I didn't need 7, right? I think a truck is like 13 or something like that. But anyhow, all we do with that concrete is instead of finding another place to put it, we just pour it into the void on the overdig. So the situation where you have over excess concrete, which you typically don't, because we know our wall is either going to be 6 inches or 8 inches all the way around, all the time, regardless of the dig. Hey, you know what? It was a 4-foot overdig. We really messed up on that. Build your wall, your concrete's going to be exactly the same. So we never miss on the amount of concrete that we need for a wall. We seldomly miss on the floor, right? Because the floor, there's some variables there, but we've been out at job sites where the waste on concrete is almost nil, right? Where I've heard on other jobs from builders sometimes where, concrete busted the budget, right? Because, like in Arizona, monsoons, right? Monsoons come in, basically, they flood the pool, they bury the rebar, walls cave. Well, the easiest thing to do if a wall caves is just to shoot concrete over it. Well, that's cost.
Yeah.
Right?
It's expensive.
Okay? Or you form the wall, right? Yep. But wait. If we use ICF, we already formed the wall, right? So, a thought of mine back then too was like, sure, dude, like this is a fantastic product for when we know it's going to rain, right? Nothing's going to happen to my dig. It doesn't matter what happens to my dig, right? I'm building a base.
That's a really good point.
And it doesn't matter how bad your excavator is, right? If the kids want to go outside and dig a hole, who cares, right? We're going to build a wall and we're going to pour the wall and we're going to have a pool, right? Where, there's a lot of other things that happen with shotcrete, a lot of things that we pay for because it has to be perfect, right? It has to be perfect. So that's the thing. Like, hey, shotcrete, gunite, all fantastic products, right? We're just looking at a different way how you can build it and some potential opportunities for you to save time and money.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that ICF pools are they allow for faster, cleaner job sites.
Absolutely.
All right, pool people, that's the end of part 1 of our ICF myth-busting ride with Magic Manny. We hit the big stuff. ICF isn't more expensive by default. It's not just for basements. It's not weaker. And it's definitely not some foam floaty Burger King Playland situation. We talked real-world labor, build speed, insulation, cold climate performance, design flexibility, and why the foam isn't the structure. It's the form. The concrete is the muscle. But we're not done, because in Part 2, we keep going. And next week, you're getting the other half with Myth-Busting Natalie, where we keep tearing down the assumptions, digging into the details, and finishing the conversation the right way. So if this episode just rewired your brain a little bit, good. Come back next week for Part 2. Same show, same energy, more myths getting body slammed. Until then, keep it tight, keep it plumb, and for the love of all things waterproofed, don't let Mike in left field fix anything. See you next week with Myth-Busting Natalie.